So I recently talked about in one of my previous videos, when will cell phones and therefore smartphones really start to make their way in the third world and in societies that have limited monetary funds to really participate in our consumer society? And I referenced the point of where a Google CEO or top executive was talking about how, if you look at 5 or 7 years ago, cell phones were just what we call dumb cell phones, flip phones, very basic phones. And now within that 5 or 7 year gap, we have smartphones, and it's kind of anyone can get a smartphone because I think the iPhone 3GS now is completely free. You can go in and get it with any signed contract. I think for like $20 you can get on eBay, so you can use it with any data plan. So one thing we got to realize though is as we had to, everyone in these first world countries, America, Europe, really anywhere that experiences consumerism, planned obsolescence. We plan for devices to only last for 2 or 3 years. We don't put the best parts in them anymore because, for instance, back in the day when we made radios, they made radios to last for 10, 15 years. We're talking about the 1930s and 40s, of course, because it was designed that, a family would buy a nice big radio and they would intentionally never want to buy another one. And if they did, they'd buy a part for it. Nowadays, you buy a radio or a system or even a surround sound box, which is right behind the camera right now, and they're built to last for, 5 years max and then be replaced because the standards are advancing so quick. So when I hear the question of, well, they just got to make cheaper smartphones so the third world can get them, yes and no. They need to make the ability for, poor people in third world countries to have a way to connect to the rest of the world. And, a lot of ways that is having a mobile phone or a mobile communication device because it's handheld. It has a big enough screen you can communicate with it, but also allows you to use 3G, which in these areas is a lot more easier to use than setting up Wi-Fi and internet connections through fiber and cable connections. So we look at it and we say, well, we're trying to solve a question to a problem that might not exist in 5 or 10 years. And it's kind of hard to think about. We plan for these things, and sometimes planning, we don't anticipate the rapid change in technology and advancements in the technology field and in the way that we are consumers. For instance, look at how many iPhone 4s are on the market right now. What happens in 2 years when everybody has an iPhone 6 or 7? Most of these iPhone 4s won't be very popular. Well, there's such an over market for these that you get to a point where almost everybody, it's estimated, I think, that like 50 or 60% of all adults in the United States that's over 18 have a smartphone. So the gap is closing for those that have smartphones. So then you have these huge stockpile of phones that still work, but nobody wants them. And so what you're starting to see, you see this in the clothing industry, old clothes and stuff, they'll ship over to third world countries because nobody in America wants them anymore, they're outdated or whatever. Well, the same thing happens to technology. We send our recycles over there sometimes, and they never really truly get recycled. We literally dump tons and tons and tons of material that literally these people just go through and try to find precious metals or silver or whatever components are worthwhile or copper inside these mechanical boards and all this electronics so that they can buy food for the day. Well, you gotta look at the income of these areas. But as we progress as society and technology advances, it's not uncommon for these areas to start getting technologies. The problem is this cost derivative. One thing though, if you can make a dumb phone, I think they've proven this over and over, they can make dumb phones now. And I'm talking about like the flip phones and stuff, they're very, very basic models. If you were to make no profit as a company, you could make them for like $3 or $4 because there's not much technology in these phones. The problem becomes getting them to these users and then also having a way for these devices to communicate to the outside world via satellite, which isn't very prevalent because satellite phones use tons of radiation. There's a whole side effect of satellite phones that I won't even get into. But if you have the communication box that sits off to the side and you have a phone that connects, they're pretty good devices. Not meant to be used 24/7, of course, though. But usually cell towers are brought in. Therefore, you have to bring in fiber lines. There's a whole bunch of infrastructure that comes along with this. Google, I think, was talking about using hot air balloons for internet connections in third worlds. There's innovations coming through. I think within 20 years, and I know this seems like a very far distance because I'm talking about oh my gosh, I'm 18, so I'll be 38 when I'm talking about 20 years in advance, which 38, that's crazy. Um, but we're talking about a time when, if you look back 100 years ago, 20 years, oh, okay, 200 years ago, 20 years wasn't a big difference. Now it's incredible. In 20 years, look 20 years back. Most average Americans did not have internet connections 20 years ago. Let that sink in for a sec. The internet that we use today, the internet they're using to watch my video on, the internet that we do so many things on, didn't really get prevalently used by the average American 20 years ago. So as we look at technological advances, we must first look at the unpredictable. What kind of crazy things will some crazy intelligent person invent that will just perpetually change the world? I would like to see a day and age before I die where every single person on this earth has a way to communicate with the rest of society and is able to make more than just enough money to pay for their food, where they can be consumers, they can be advocates in the whole world. And there is a lot of problems we gotta look into. I know people talk about, food populations and all this crazy stuff, but really the first means to having an intelligent world is having people be able to speak the same language, English, or any language, Chinese, whatever language, or Spanish, whatever you choose to be your dominant, whatever language, but having a means to communicate. I can't pick up the phone and call some random person that can barely afford food in Africa. But maybe in 80 years, I would really hope in 80 years we'd have something way better. But in 20 years, 15, 10 years, how great would it be that every single person on this planet was connected digitally? We could share experiences, we could share thoughts. Right now we only have 1.5 billion people in the world have some way or some availability to internet. Not even internet close to them, in a personal device like a cell phone or a tablet, but just internet as of being able to go to the public library. Imagine when we have, it'll probably be by this time 8 billion people in the world. Right now we're at 7.1, right? Billion. Imagine when all those people can communicate and develop things. We talk about having micro markets, right? To the fact where when you have 1 billion people in the world, someone that makes cloth that has a certain design can have a market share where they can survive by just selling that to everyone in the world. Imagine when you have 8 billion people. That just explodes, and the knowledge base of humanity will grow exponentially. Because with the ability to connect to internet sites, we also have the ability to learn, and people can educate themselves for free without having to rely on government education, which I'm very profound at wanting to see more public education, but in poor countries sometimes it's not available. And to have a digital connection so you can just go out and grab this information and pull it in and learn is what we're all looking for in society. That's what we want to see, because just imagine when every single person has the knowledge of the world in their palm of the hand. The first world countries already have this. Second world countries are starting to get it. Third world countries are going to have it in the next 20, 25 years. And that is where it gets so amazingly incredible that I can't even comprehend. So when you're using your cell phone, just remember, you're in that 1%, that 5% of the world that has the ability to connect. Imagine someday when 100% of people have the ability to connect, and when maybe 99% of the population has a cell phone and is able to communicate with the world and society as a whole. That is mind-boggling. That is amazing. So anyway, thanks for watching. I just wanted to kind of give an overview of my thoughts of how quickly technologies will allow us to communicate with others. And I've heard a lot of questioning around Reddit and stuff and on blogs about the third world cell phones so they can communicate. And I think it's coming, and I think it's going to come a lot quicker than predictions show, because if technology shows us anything, it's that when you give people the power to change the world, they change the world. Thanks.